One. All right, play it forward with Eyal Resh, Israeli filmmaker living in LA by coastal New York, all over the map. And you've got two very strong films that we'll be discussing today, Boys and Arrival. You were nominated by Laura Beckner, and her film was Le Rebound, also a great film. Eyal, welcome.
Thank you.
So man, I checked out both films. Boys is certainly a pretty heavy film to watch, and I think what is interesting is that there are really overlapping themes between the two films, Boys and Arrival. What was your inspiration for this film as well as Arrival?
So for Boys, my inspiration, I mean, it's the story that made me want to make films. I was growing up in the 90s and discovering I was gay. I was sure that I was the only person in the world that is gay. It wasn't as it is today, that it's, the presentation of gay people are essentially everywhere. I was really sure I'm the only one. And so I wish there was a film like Boys back then when I was growing up, just so I know sexual awakening isn't a crime, because I did grow up
I love that, dude. Sexual awakening isn't a crime. It's like, skateboarding isn't a crime. Yeah, it's sexual awakening. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And on the same note. Yeah. So I just knew that one day I'll have the courage to make this film. And it was hard. It took a lot of time to gather the courage. It's my thesis film from CalArts, where I got my master's in film directing. So it's a studential project. I worked on it in school. Yeah.
I just wanted, sorry to cut you off for a second. The kids, the actors, phenomenal. I mean,
thank you.
Couldn't imagine doing that at their age, and and all the rigmarole that you must have had to go through in terms of casting and parent, approval and signatures.
Oh yeah.
That's wow. So I wondered, just on a side note, how you handled that, but that's not important. That's just logistics, really. I did want to give credit to those young actors. Phenomenal job.
I'll pass it to them. Yeah, and I agree. And I mean, these are the two first boys that walked into the audition room, and I've seen.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
And they came in together, huh? They knew each other.
No, but they came in right one after another.
Oh,
back to back, almost like they were sent to me. It was like a sign.
Right.
And I knew that for this piece, I needed very interesting children and very open parents. We were blunt about everything. We were open about everything. More importantly than making this film was not to harm the children. And we did everything to do that, including being just upfront about everything. I mean, there was no secret. It's a film about two best friends that are discovering things with one another. And that's what the boys knew, and that's what the film is about, So it wasn't a lie. I just didn't use the word sexual awakening with boys that are, that would not know how to take it. Interestingly enough, speaking of having boys out there, on our Facebook page, since we got distribution and now we're on Amazon and Vimeo on demand, and there's a lot of traction for the film in the mainstream audience. We have like 400 likes by specifically, I think like 300 of them are people from the Middle East, from countries like Saudi Arabia, from Iraq, like little children that just like the page. I'm not sure how they get to it, but there's nothing that is more fulfilling for me to know that somehow they got to it and they just like the piece. We're trying to communicate with them, but they speak only Arabic. But we're kind of successful with some of them.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting that they have. I not too long ago had a filmmaking friend. He's since left back to Saudi Arabia, but he was from there, and he told me about the public beheadings for offenses like homosexuality. So
exactly.
Yeah. So okay, well, that was the inspiration for Boys, and what about for Arrival?
For Arrival, it's a very famous story in my family because it's a story that happened to me and my mom, actually. I tweaked it, obviously, and I added some spice to the narrative, of course. But it's a very famous story. When my mom was with me in a layover in Germany, something very similar had happened between her and an older German lady. And since then, she didn't come back to Berlin or to Germany. So I was like, I grew up knowing that my mom is scared of Germany because of that experience. Obviously, it has a lot of weight of history, right? But I went there. I got accepted to a student exchange program between CalArts and the DFFB, and I was there. And I was like, and I have roots from Germany. That most of them were killed during the Holocaust. So I was there, and I was like, okay, I have to reenact this experience that I've only heard of, you know. And it's a film about collective memory, right? Because the mom on this train is not afraid from something that she's experienced herself. I felt the same way because I didn't experience that story myself. Not that I can't remember. I mean, I was there, but I was a child. I can't remember it. So the idea of collective memory and like past memory, or memory that is like what's the word for that? Like when you have furniture of older brothers passing down.
Legacy.
Like, yeah, exactly. So just like I knew that it happened to me, but I didn't have a vivid memory in my mind. And so I really wanted to make this film just to explore this.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, I guess unlike Boys, where the tension builds up to a pivotal moment of conflict, or, you know, conflict essentially, the Arrival works a little differently, where there's this underlying tone of conflict that never really culminates into any danger, but there's a suspicious overtone, and then at the end it really resolves itself into trust. Am I reading the film correctly?
Yes, completely. And it's interesting because I just had a conversation about the fact of like the two major differences in films for me, specifically short ones, but also longer, is like if the characters are coming together or like driving apart. And in Arrival, it's eventually it's about them coming together, right? But from a very apart way, or from a very apart perspective. In Boys, they're always they're coming together, you know.
Yeah,
And that leads them to break apart. So it's just like this idea of how difficult. I guess it's like two completely different challenges. Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think certainly both, you know, realistic experiences that in that wave that you just described are essential and, you know, happen daily.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So what, and, you know, I can understand and sympathize with an artist. It's a challenging question, but I think nonetheless um, it's worthwhile to think about, both as an artist and, you know, making the film after. What message do you see each film communicating?
Well, I think I'll start with Boys. I would say that it's okay to be human. Because sexual awakening is such a quintessentially human experience that we all go through. And I'd say that Arrival it's time to continue. It's time to not linger on the past. And not necessarily with regards to the German-Israeli conflict. It's with everything. Or also in Boys, it's not necessarily about reconciliation with you being gay, because they're not necessarily gay. They might grow up and become straight people, you know, or like whatever they decide, or queer. So you see, like, even when I address that, it's always important for me in all my work not to do something that is too specific, because then it loses its universality. So yeah, it's just, it gives permission for like deeper emotion, I'd say, both.
Cool, thank you. You know, one of the things that I think is interesting about both movies is this idea of trust, and like you were saying, intimacy. And intimacy is, you know, you can't have intimacy without trust, and how that builds and is broken in each. And essentially, you know, both films have this sense of moving on beyond broken trust.
Mm-hmm.
So
I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you for appreciating it. And then the last question is, how have you changed? And this can be anything from wisdom on the set to your personal life off the set. Ideally, it's a combination of both. And if you can even consider it within the timeline of making Arrival and then Boys, you know, that would be great.
Yes. Well, Aside of the fact that I was on set working with actors, and that's also always something good that I keep doing since too, every month or so. It's just like sharpening the tools. I think I became more courageous. I think in both cases it was a huge challenge. Obviously, boys is a step up, but I told myself if I directed two 12-year-old boys in an encounter and a sleepover, like in bed, I can direct anything. You know,
Right, sure.
if I had the courage to do that, having
Yeah.
like a studio teacher and like two parents outside of the room, like literally on the other side of the door, and still be able to not harm the children, because it's not only about doing it, right? It's about how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like it gave me a validation that my stories are worth telling, and that if I have this like hunch, or not hunch, but the scratch that I have to tell something, even though it looks very obscure or like very challenging or or terrifying to tell, I'm gonna still do it, and I'm not afraid of the challenge because it proved itself, right? Like it's getting to people, so it's doing what I wanted it to. It's changing people's minds.
That's great. And what do you think? It's interesting that you mentioned that you like to sharpen the saw monthly by directing actors, and I assume that you're talking about you have some sort of workshop that you do on a regular basis.
That too, but I also shoot a lot of films. I also work like that's recently in the last year. I've realized with myself that I am not like stagnation is the worst thing, specifically for filmmakers, and just because film is such a heavy art form, logistically speaking, it requires a lot of money and people and like a crew. It's not like I play the piano too, so I can just play the piano and I'm with myself. I just need a piano. So I decided with myself to constantly practice, even if it's shit, even if some of it is, or sometimes it's amazing. I don't know. I just want to indulge. I just want to be there. If I'm a filmmaker, I want to be making films. Aside of that, I was until recently part of a group in New York City called Sandbox, which was an incredible experience, and I hope they all start doing it in LA as well. There is some like a beginning for that, but it's essentially a group of directors that meet weekly for 4 hours. And the managers of the project of this group are bringing actors in, and each time there's a script, a short dialogue script, like of like 2 minutes, and 4 directors go on the same actors with different approaches, and direct the scene in front of all the other fellow directors.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's an incredible idea, and it's really sharpening the tools of like just work. But that's specifically for working with actors. Obviously, as film directors and filmmakers, we know that that's only one portion. For me, it's the biggest portion, but it's only one out of a few. So that didn't give me everything. But specifically with working with actors, I was able to fall on my face and make mistakes and have people reflect that to me in a very respectful manner. Of course,
that's wonderful.
Yes, and I reflected to them, and it was a really beautiful growing opportunity. Check it out.
I will. Yes, send me the link.
Okay.
What are the what's some wisdom that you've gathered in making movies and in terms of directing actors that you can pass on to other filmmakers?
Yeah, well, I'd say that the biggest wisdom is, like Stanislavski said, I'm reading a lot about acting techniques. I'm pretty obsessed with it.
Yeah.
He said that. Yeah, I agree. I'm just finishing Stella Adler now. She's amazing. She was.
Yeah.
So Stanislavski said that acting is about living truthfully under imaginative circumstances. And I think that it's my job as a director to allow my actors to do so. And some actors could flourish under the right direction, and some actors could crush under the wrong direction, even though they're incredibly talented. So I really see that as my responsibility to allow them to truthfully live under the circumstances that I give them, and to create, to nurture or to facilitate a secured environment for them to really bring their emotion into fruition, to really get it out of themselves.
Well, that's a great guiding principle and goal. And then when you get into the room and you just see something that doesn't seem honest, how do you modify?
In terms of an actor?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that happens quite often.
Sure.
Maybe honesty, sometimes it happens when I feel like they're not honest. Sometimes I feel like they're not allowing themselves to be present, which is different for me. Because some people are very honest, but under like it's a spotlight are becoming too, intimidated.
Yeah, great distinction.
Yeah, I would just be very specific about the circumstances. And usually when it happens, it's because an actor is trying to perform an idea and not a specific set of circumstances or a set of facts, right? Like usually when I feel like they're not there is because they're not given the specific enough moment that will ground them back. So the first phase is I'm specifying even more the direction and simplifying, reducing to the bare minimum, and then they don't really have a choice but to live in it, you know?
Okay, so do you mean direction in terms of action?
Yes, exactly. And then that kind of like quote unquote forces them, because it's a nice forcing, right? I'm not like there's no gun against their head, but that allows them to create something different. And sometimes when I try that many times from many different angles, and I feel that the actor is still showing me or indicating something, I would say that. What I would say is not like you're showing me. No, I would never say that. I would say like I'm releasing you from the obligation of showing me that you're performing. You know, so that's great. Yeah, it's more of an invitation to feel free in the moment, and like 99% of the times it works.
That's great. That's a great tangible tip that I think people can take away. That's really cool.
Pleasure.
So, one thing I wanted to offer you is, you mentioned and historically, I think you're, completely right in terms of filmmaking being such an extensive art form, money, time, cost, labor, and something that we're promoting here at Digipops and hope that it will stick and take off in time is that a hybrid approach where people are looking for documentaries to script as narratives. So they can essentially shoot in terms of a narrative, but a real live documentary event of a drama that may be going on in their lives or someone else's. And that way it's really about a guy with a camera and very little direction, and really the narrative forms in the edit, as well as scripted in pre-production.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah. So that way, like you said, you can make, a lot of work, and it does become more of a guy with an instrument kind of a deal.
Yes, exactly. And I think that the more practical route to take, it's very strategical, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, how can I make? I mean, that's a question I'm asking myself every morning.
Yeah.
What you've just explained to me is a beautiful way of approaching it. Because making is not about making it big. Making is about making.
Right.
And so, like, the making could be on the iPhone too, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, today it's so easy and radically available. Yeah, so I think that it's beautiful that you do that. And also what it prompts is that, people usually tell their stories the best. Sure. I mean, I think it takes a different level of a different level of like filmmaking to tap into someone else's story and tell it as good. Usually, you just smell it in the frame. I can taste it. Okay, so whoever made that film knows. I mean, Xavier Dolan with like his mom issues, I think it's a great example for this. You can just feel that he went through this. I'm now trying to graduate to a level where I'm also telling other people's story and finding myself within them. But using documentary is essentially this, right? It's essentially tapping into something that is close to your heart and narrativizing it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that's accessible from a logistic point of view.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, Eyal, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Really wonderful to meet you. Two great films. We look forward to sharing you on, with our community, and look forward to hearing about more to come from you. And great job. Keep up the great work, man.
Thank you so much. It was truly an honor to be here, and I really believe in what you're doing. So I'm giving you like a thumbs up from my direction as well.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Honor on my side as well, man. Thanks so much for that, and I look forward to being in touch.
Awesome, me too. Thank you, Costa.
Thanks. Bye-bye, man.
Bye-bye.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other, fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.